On today's episode of Locked On Knicks podcast, I'm joined by Bailey Liao to break down how the Knicks offense will attack the Detroit Pistons, why Karl-Anthony Towns is the key to their success on that end of the floor.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey, what's up, guys? My name is Gavin Schall. I'm your Saturday host of the Locked On NBA podcast, and of course, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster. In case you don't know, this is Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day, giving you the best and most detailed coverage on your New York Knicks 5 whole days a week. This week, way more than 5 whole days because it's the playoffs. So be sure to join thousands of other fans on YouTube in subscribing to ensure you never miss an episode. And be sure to do the same on your favorite podcast platform of choice for the best insight on your favorite team every single day. We want to remind you that today's episode is brought to you by our good friends over at Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. And if 5 days a week is not enough for you, well, we also have a newsletter. Your favorite podcast now is a newsletter. We're introducing Locked On Knicks daily newsletter, the one-stop shop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. You can sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com, and start your day with the all-new free Locked On Knicks newsletter. Get writing from Alex and I, our fantastic team of national writers here at Locked On. I'm really excited to keep it up throughout the playoffs, and I hope you tune in with us, especially because if you subscribe before April 30th, you can win a prize, as we're going to talk about at the end of the show. But on today's episode with Bailey, this is going to be part 1 of 2 with him, both of which are going to come out today. We are talking the Knicks offense and unlocking Karl-Anthony Towns, and also how the Knicks can get their wings going in the series. What are the best players to put around Jalen Brunson to maximize him, and a whole lot more. Really excited to get into it with Bailey. All right, guys, as promised, we are lucky enough to be joined by Bailey Liao, a contributor to the Strickland. Really excited to get to talk to you again, buddy. It was super fun. Last time we had you on the pod. Slightly bigger stakes this time, series preview. Thanks for joining me to go through it.
Yeah, of course. It's always good to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit pre-show, and we were kind of going over the idea of like how confident are we coming into this series, which isn't an angle like Alex and I have talked about a lot, and where I was coming at it, coming out of the end of the season. Where I was pretty disappointed, maybe outside of the Suns game and the Celtics game, how the Knicks looked really the last 2 games with Brunson, that Pistons game and that Cavs game. And I thought there were some causes for concern. And I sort of sat there and said, well, you know what, like if the Knicks like push the right buttons against this Detroit team, despite Detroit going 3-1 against them in the regular season, despite the fact that like everyone's the stat, but over the last 52 games or so, Detroit's been a top 6 team in the NBA by net rating. Despite all that, like the Knicks simply have more talent. They have really clear ways to go at Detroit. That why I don't think Detroit has as obvious ways to attack the Knicks, even if there are some. The Knicks should win this series. And yet the way Tom Thibodeau has coached this team this year, I have some real concerns on whether or not the Knicks are actually going to hit those buttons. I know that's very broad, but what is your general feel coming into this series?
Yeah, so I think Knicks are almost certainly going to win. And I share a lot of the concerns that you share about whether or not the coaching is there, whether or not the right buttons will be pushed. I think that matters a lot more in a series like Boston, where you need to be pushing different buttons. But for the most part, like everything that needs to go right for the Knicks in this series are things that they've done throughout the season. It's just not the things that they ended the season doing, but like there's a history throughout the season of like, oh, these are like what you need to do to go against a team like the Pistons. And we'll get into more in depth of that later, but that's kind of generally why I think like, yeah, of course, like the Knicks have to be pushing the right buttons, but these are like buttons that have been pushed throughout the season already.
So I guess to that point, I'm curious at looking like at those 4 regular season games, because going back through them, watching some, going through my notes, I think I kept coming back to the idea of like, was there randomness in Detroit going 3-1, or there again like kind of clear things that the Pistons were doing that the Knicks just don't have answers for. And like I almost throw out the first game of the year and the last game of the year against them. The first game, Detroit just wasn't Detroit yet. They look like a improved version of the team that lost 28 games in a row a year ago, but certainly not the heights they hit again over these last 50 plus games. Basically, at the start of the new year, the Pistons became just a completely different team. And of course, that fourth game, the Knicks play PJ Tucker, 26 minutes. They limit the minutes of their stars. I do think there are things to watch, particularly in the last 6 minutes of that game where the Knicks did have their guys out there. Obviously, aside from Hart and Anunoby, and we're trying to win, and we're Jalen Brunson in particular, were really struggling to score the basketball with any kind of efficiency. I think went 4 or 5 minutes without a basket, maybe even longer if I'm misremembering that. You look at the second and third games, and Cade was essentially perfect in those games, like just beat for beat. Like watching back, I was kind of stunned just looking at him and saying, this is almost prime LeBron-esque, obviously not from like a physicality perspective, but just from a basketball mind perspective, how he just made the right decision over and over again. And every time he looked to score, he just, whether it was shooting, whether it was driving, he just burned the Knicks so many different ways. I thought it was about as good as a single player has played against this team all year. So maybe that's not super random. And then the other things I looked at were no Cat in the second game, no Mitch in any of these games. Pistons only had Thompson for 2 of the games. And the most easily correctable part of it was just how poor the Knicks were, like guarding the Piston shooters and botching switches, not finding them in transition, putting 2 on the ball, but rotating to the wrong guy. I think a lot of that is correctable, but again, sort of a broad way to look at this series. But what are kind of your initial thoughts on all those things I laid out?
I don't think it's random. I think, well, one, Cade is an incredible player. If Cade plays like that, it's just going to be hard to beat them. Yeah. The thing is, we have one of the best defenders in the NBA that you can deploy to be guarding Cade, which Cade played very well with OG guarding him in the third game. Mm-hmm. But over the course of a series, I feel comfortable that his life will be a lot tougher, a lot more difficult. And that should kind of take down those middle 2 games, the second and third game, where he played really well, to kind of just like a more normal level. I would also say on the second game, the biggest advantage the Knicks actually have against the Pistons is going to be Cat. So while, yes, Asar's out, there are different pieces that are going in and out of the rotation. I think Cat's just the biggest piece for why it's going to be very difficult for the Pistons to stop the Knicks. And also, that's why I don't want to throw out the fourth game. If the Knicks use Cat like that, you're just digging yourself into a hole. And like, if that's how they're going to play, if that's what they choose to deploy Cat like, then that's just an abject failure at every level. It's just not something I think will happen.
All right, so let's start off with Cap. As we touched on him in one of the earlier pods we did this week. I think Alex touched on him a little bit in our crossover episodes that we put out yesterday. But to me, he is him and like I heard on Knicks Film School they did a player draft of the most important players of the series, and Cade went first, Brunson went second. I was thinking, like, you know what? I think I would actually, and this is most important, not best. I think I would actually take Cat in that draft over Brunson. I think he is the Knicks swing player in that series, and maybe some of that is like, I think I know what we're going to get from Brunson on both ends, where Cat, especially offensively, a little bit defensively, I think is a real mystery, and it's less so about his talent, and it's less so about the fact that he's been a playoff dropper in years past. Maybe there's some of that, and maybe we're underestimating that, and we'll see for ourselves what Timberwolves fans have been complaining about with him for years, but it is more so about how he is deployed. And I think what you were hinting at was first game of the year against the Pistons, he shoots 6 threes. Actually, at that point in the year where the Knicks were really struggling to get Cat threes at the beginning of the season, that was at that point the most threes he'd taken in any game as a Knick. He went 3 for 6. Second game, he gets up 9 threes, obviously a fantastic number. And he actually starts off 4 for 6 from 3. That was the game where he initially like broke that bone fragment in his thumb. And he misses his last 3 threes down the stretch. In retrospect, some of that because he was missing them badly, probably because of the thumb injury. Third game, he takes just 1 3. And I look at that and I say, the question we've all been asking all season long, this guy is not just one of the great big man shooters in the NBA, he's one of the great shooters, period, in the NBA, and yet he takes less a game than Tamani Kamara does on the Pacers. Not the Pacers, the Trailblazers. How do we get Karl-Anthony Towns shooting more threes in these games, Bailey? But first, we want to tell you about our friends over at Upwork. Scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more, experts ready to help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives businesses flexibility by connecting them with top freelance talents across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need extra hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. Finding the right talent. If you need help with a marketing campaign, Upwork can connect you with a freelance expert who delivered incredible results. Fast and easy hiring. Posting a job is free and simple within a day with multiple qualified candidates to choose from. Cost-effective growth instead of hiring full-time. Upwork finds affordable, top-tier freelancers to scale my business efficiently. So visit Upwork.com right now. Post your job for free. That's UPWORK.com, Upwork.com to connect with top talent and grow your business today.
Yeah, so there's a difference between we're not able to scheme open looks for Cat when there's like a wing on him, right?
Mhm.
And like that's also a knock on the coaching staff that we haven't been able to get him more looks throughout the course of the season. But specifically for this series, I expect the Pistons to have the traditional center Duren on Cat to start the series. In that situation, there's not much scheming that you need. Right. So the only thing you need, and you saw it a lot in that last game, the fourth game, where on those pick and rolls, Cat would start to like drift into the middle of the paint, kind of just try to cut, try to see if he can roll in those situations. You just can't do that. Right. Like Brunson needs to know that. Cat needs to know that. Tibbs has to know that. And I fully expect that they do know that. And when you see when this series starts on Saturday, I expect like the first play to be a pick and pop where Cat doesn't drift into the paint. Like these are just things that don't require anything different to happen than the regular season, because early on in the season you would see these pick and pops. Obviously not to the degree that honestly I would like to see, but they happened. They were there before teams started putting their center on Hart. Right. So that last game was weird. That last game obviously shouldn't have happened with Cat rolling as much as he did. I'm not exactly sure whose like responsibility falls on everyone there. I don't know if I want to place like core responsibility on anyone. Maybe the coaching staff, maybe Cat, but like you just have to be able to know like this is a simple play. This is exact. Duren is going so deep into the paint every time you're running this. You have to be able to sit at the top of the key and take that pass from Brunson and shoot a three. It's not like complicated. It's not rocket science. It's obviously things that the Knicks have done early on in the season, which is why that's, I think, like very clearly out of the gate, you're going to see the Knicks look good offensively against this Pistons defense. It's a defense that is predicated around stopping paint touches. They're very good in the paint. They're very good at defending the paint. But the downside of doing something like that, right, is you're open for the pick and pop. You're open to, or you're weak to shooting bigs. And Cat is arguably the best shooting big ever.
Yeah, I do think I'm fascinated to see how long the Pistons keep a traditional center on him. I would think JB Bickerstaff, who we've seen Tom Thibodeau outcoach in a series before, but I think he will have that adjustment ready to go in game one. And if I were Detroit, I would certainly start with my center probably guarding Josh Hart, and then maybe even Cade Cunningham on Karl-Anthony Towns. And if you want to put Asar Thompson on Jalen Brunson, just so you can do what so many teams have done and just switch that play pretty easily. But to your point, maybe not, because the Knicks last time out didn't burn them on it. And we saw Detroit close that fourth game almost, I would describe it like a pack line defense, basically, which you typically do not see very often at the NBA level. Like they had four guys in the paint, and that's where Jalen Brunson struggled to do anything, because he was just sort of trying to ram his head into a brick wall. And similar with Karl-Anthony Towns, like he scored 7 points in those final few minutes against the Pistons, but they didn't come easy because Detroit was, again, just like daring the Knicks to do literally anything else. I do think part of it also is like to what extent the Knicks insist on continue to play Josh Hart if he either doesn't take threes and doesn't make threes, and like that'll certainly affect their ability to commit extra guys to the paint. I think it's important on a number of different fronts that Cat is not over driving, especially when Hart is in the game. One, because I think Duren he's just too big for and can dislodge. Stewart he's probably too fast for, but there have been times where Stewart stood him up just because Stewart is very strong. And then the other thing there is like if Hart's on the floor, like the Pistons can double, and we've seen all year Cat really struggle to kick out in those scenarios. Fred Katz on the same KFS pod I was referencing had a great stat that out of the 213 players in the NBA that have played the most minutes in the league this year, Kat is 211th in terms of his passing rate out of drives. I do think that's gotten a little bit better in recent weeks, but he struggles against better defenses doing that, which Detroit would certainly qualify as. And then the other thing is like just how often Kat ends up on the floor when he drives and he goes full speed and misses a layup. And I think that's going to be a real issue against Detroit, especially if the refs are swallowing their whistle and kind of allowing a physical series. From the get-go, you're going to see these full speed Kat drives where he misses and he just lays on the floor and he looks back at the ref to complain. And Detroit is so good in transition. And I think it is particularly deadly because you have those shooters like Beasley, like Hardaway that are so good catching, setting their feet, firing. I think those are plays that can swing momentum, can swing games, and if Kat is over penetrating and we're having a lot of that, it could be a real issue for this team. I want to dive a little bit more into generating threes for Kat, but I think the other angle of how Kat could potentially dominate is if the Knicks go double big at times. And it's something Tom Thibodeau hinted at in his press conference today. Detroit is really susceptible on the offensive glass. Knicks on the season had a 30% offensive rebounding rate against them, which would be one of the highest marks in the NBA. I think the second best mark in the NBA for a full season. That was with Mitchell Robinson playing in none of those games. Do you see that as kind of an avenue to use Kat as well? Or do you lean into the stretch five element just because you don't think the Pistons can really cover that? And obviously the math sort of favors you there.
I would lead into the stretch five. But as you said, I fully expect the Pistons to make the adjustment. So I think I think they start the series out with Durant on Kat, but I think very quickly they'll get shot out of that. Yeah. So when they make the adjustment, they put the center on they put the center on Hart. That's when I think the Mitch Kat 2 big lineup could be interesting. Even before that, I would just like to see the Knicks play against the center on Hart lineup because I think watching this team the whole year, we've kind of gotten to a point where the center on Hart is like a killer, which it is true when teams have good defenders all around the court. So like it works really well for like the Celtics, right? It works really well for OKC, but there have been games where like the center has been on Hart and the Knicks have had great offensive games. So like the one against Portland comes to mind where Mikal just absolutely destroyed Klingon in that formation every single time, right? Duran's not the greatest drop defender. So if they want to come out with Durant on Hart, this is what the Knicks have practiced, unfortunately, the entire season playing against this. So you drag Hart into the screen, have him be the screener. If Durant wants to play drop, then that's just Brunson being able to have a lot of space every single time, right? You need like a good drop defender to be able to contain that action and make that really effective. The second thing is if they want to bring Durant to trap, which I expect they do as well. Hart's also been good in that position, just playmaking, being kind of like a playmaker out of the short roll. And I think he'll be fine against this Pistons team as well. Now, if you're starting to see the same things you see throughout the season where like the offense looks stagnant, Hart's not being used as a screener, yes, I would like to see the Twin Towers. I honestly also want, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I want to see that also because we didn't get to see it as much in the regular season. And I can guarantee you'll need it if you advance in the playoffs and see the Celtics in the playoffs or other teams in the playoffs. It'll be important to have different lineup variations as well. So just from that point of view, I would like to see the lineup. Do I think we need the lineup in this series to beat the Pistons? I truthfully don't. I think like the offense the Knicks typically use is a good matchup for this defense. But yeah, it is something I'm interested in keeping an eye out on, if not just for the fact to see how willing Thibodeau is to try different things, right? Because that's honestly something that needs to happen during the playoffs. So even in this first round, seeing how willing he is to try things will be important.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. And his tendency has been that he will make adjustments. He'll be a little bit slow at times to make adjustments in the playoffs. Just some other closing notes on Kat. I would be interested, and to your point, maybe this is more creative than they have to get to have success, but I would like to see some inverted pick and roll with Kat. They ran it once in that second game with OG, and OG dove to the rim and got a layup. And it just sort of like that play is stuck with me. And it's something that they've like to give Tibbs a little bit of credit because we crap on him on this podcast so much. Like it's something he has leaned into a little bit more, particularly when Brunson was out, and something that worked pretty well. Less so inverted pick and roll and more so just more pick and roll variations. But I could even see like Cat at the top of the key, and you can have Bridges screen for him, and then you get Beasley switched on to Cat. It gives Cat just an opportunity to bulldoze him and forces the Pistons to sort of have like a 5-alarm fire level of help, and also bring. I mean, this is something we can touch on later, but like Mikal into the action with Brunson and let him attack Beasley one-on-one. We saw them. I think you retweeted this play. Like we saw them get like a pick and pop 3 late in that game 3 by bringing Bridges up as a screener for Brunson, and Beasley wasn't able to hedge and recover in time. So that's all interesting to me. Defensively for Cat in this series, it is going to be a real challenge. I think with Cade Cunningham, I do think maybe some double big could alleviate that a little, like in a scenario where like they still try to force Cat into the action against Cade. You have Mitchell Robinson there as your backline protector. That's pretty intriguing. I'm curious, like, I guess my final question in terms of Cat is, what do you want the like minutes distribution to be for him and Brunson, just in terms of the time they share the court? Because I do think while like the 2-man game between the two of them should be really effective and you should be able to hit that pick and pop button, I certainly don't think there should be a minute in this series where you have both of them on the bench, assuming they're both healthy. And I do think there are some advantages to pairing Brunson to Mitchell Robinson just as someone who's a better screener. We saw Brunson with Sims at times this year against the Pistons, particularly that second game, where he was just able to walk into threes off great screens. And then I think conversely, like pairing Cat with Payne is just a little bit better than JB about like just throwing those like hook passes back to Cat when he pops that Brunson sometimes miss, and just like that low hanging fruit to get Cat more threes that, again, Brunson, I think, has gotten better at over the course of the year. And I'm hoping they drive home in these 10 days. But then there have just been times where he misses Cat like wide open behind the arc. And that's a little bit of a concern of mine coming into the series. But first, we're going to tell you about our good friends over at Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, hey, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's super easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. They offer surprising insights. Like when I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter, and I save more, and they have all-in-one convenience instead of juggling multiple apps. You can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. My favorite part, though, is that they offer easy collaboration. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without all that stress. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA, monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. It's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year.
Yeah, one thing I really want to be on the lookout for is how lineups are deployed based on situation. So I don't even know what my preferred like set lineup is. More so like what I want to see if Kate's going on a heater, I want Mitch in immediately. And I'm like, I want to keep an eye on how fast that's happening and how quickly those adjustments are happening. Because you can kind of just let the game, as Tibbs likes to say, you let the game tell you what to do. I just want to see that, right? Like if Cade just hit a couple of threes, you're playing drop, whatever the case may be, then let's see if you bring Mitch in for Cat earlier than you typically do. And let's see if you can get a couple stops, then bring Cat in and have like a different momentum to the game.
Yeah, I'm with that. I think a big thing for me is that there are always 4 shooters on the floor, no matter what. And you don't see a lot of like, because again, Tom Thibodeau in referencing the fact that he wanted to go double big said like you might see Precious Achiuwa playing some backup center. I'm hoping Josh Hart is not on the floor for those minutes. I'm hoping when you go double big again, Josh Hart is not on the floor for those minutes. And I'm hoping when it's Mitch and Brunson, you have like 3 of Deuce, Shamit, OG, and Mikal on the floor, because I think spread pick and roll with Mitchell Robinson and around Brunson and 3 shooters. I think that is a way. I know that's like not totally a quote unquote bench lineup, but that is a way to like own non-Cat minutes in this series. And then if you're also getting a lot of threes with Cat in the regular season, the Knicks took 35 threes a game against Detroit, which is not in line with what they did against every team. So it wasn't like an outlier in a bad way, but it would just, if the Knicks can find a way to shoot 40 to 45 threes, I just think it is going to be really, really challenging for Detroit to keep pace with that.
Yeah, agreed. And I think they can, or at least I think they will be on pace and then force the Pistons to adjust out of their base scheme.
All right, let's pivot over before we go other side of the ball. Let's talk wings a little bit. Mikal Bridges, weird season for him. It's been pretty good in all 4 games against the Pistons. What are you looking for out of him in this series?
I would go wings in general. I'm just looking at how they attack Tim Hardaway Jr.
Mm-hmm.
Like throughout the course of the season, the Knicks haven't been the best at going after weaker guards. So like the Trey game comes to mind. Even though they did try to like post Mikal up or get Trey switched onto Brunson, it doesn't happen as much as I would like, especially with a weaker defender. And generally, like even when the center on Hart matchup happens, I think one of the weaknesses of that is you can attack a weaker guard, right? So whoever Tim Hardaway Jr. is on, because you have 3 good, or because OG and Mikal are both offensively talented wings, I don't think you need to spend like 8 seconds trying to get Tim Hardaway Jr. onto Brunson and then have Brunson attacking.
Yeah.
Just go to Mikal, go to OG, where during the time that Brunson was hurt, you saw that they could have these performances, right? So like you have a good offensive wing, you have a very, very weak wing defender, and you also have a weak drop defender in Duren or Stewart. So I think like it will be good to see how much the Knicks lean on that. Mean on, okay, like maybe we just find this avenue of attacking where we just pick on their weakest defender and then see how that goes. Because I mean, I'm pretty sure that'll work, and it's just not something we've seen throughout the season as much. So I'm curious to see if we lean on that a little bit more.
I'm 100% with you. It's been maybe my biggest, well, not my biggest frustration, but it's been one of my biggest frustrations with Tibbs all year, because if like I'm an advocate for starting Deuce and playing 5 out, because I just think this offense would be unstoppable with that kind of spacing. And it would also make, like when Cat does drive, and I talked about his issues passing out of drives, it just makes it so much easier when you don't have like an obvious person to double off of, or if you do double off them, like then like the reads for Karl-Anthony Towns, like you can almost make them like you had it for Julius Randle in the past, where he was like throwing hook passes blind because he just knew where everyone was in set spots on the floor. You can almost do a little bit of that with Cat if you have 5 shooters. But if you don't have 5 shooters, and if you have the Knicks starting lineup out there, I thought the greatest strength of this group all season was that there was nowhere to hide. And I was excited to potentially play the Bucks, because I'm like, all right, Damian Lillard, who are you going to guard? Where are you going to hide? And we saw against the Hawks, like, where are you going to put Trae Young? And the Knicks have just, like, we talk about pressing buttons, like, they have not gone to that, like, immediately. And I was even watching that Cavs game. I'm like, play through Mikal Bridges every single possession if Darius Garland is on him, because Darius Garland, unless he gets a quick steal, just has 0 chance against Mikal. And maybe Tim Hardaway and Malik Beasley are slightly elevated versions of that just because they're taller. But to your point, like Mikal Bridges is a guy, like we're 2 years removed from him averaging an efficient 24 against the Sixers as the number 1 option in a playoff series. Like he's done this, he's been there, he can score in these types of games. Like, and I think you've noted this, like if he gets the ball, if he gets confident offensively, you could potentially see like a more engaged version of him on defense. And I do think, as disappointing as he's been on that end of the floor, like if you just look at the season as a whole, there have been moments, there have been flashes. I looked at that first Oklahoma City game. I think it might have been the third Hawks game where there were this long stretch where he was locking down Trae Young. Even the beginning of the third game against the Pistons when he was guarding Cade Cunningham, there have been stretches where you have gotten like A-level defense from Mikal Bridges, and it typically coincides with him feeling himself offensively and feeling like he's involved in the game on that end of the floor.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's a little overblown how much Cade dominates Mikal.
Yeah.
Even though a lot of it, like Cade just had really, really good games, but Mikal has the capability of being a very plus defender. And as you noted, we've seen it throughout the season.
Yeah. All right. Let's before I flip to the other side of the ball, let's quickly hit on OG a little more in depth, because I am just so fascinated what version of this guy we get. Obviously, we saw the Brunsonless version that looked like someone who, like, full season of that, 2nd team All-NBA, 3rd team All-NBA type player. And we've seen since Brunson came back in that first game against the Suns, he was really good. I think because Brunson only scored 9 points and was more content getting off the ball quickly. Against the Celtics, I think we saw pretty close to what would be like an ideal hybrid version of OG, where you're like, all right, he's just not going to get the shots he got before with Brunson and Cat out there. But like, I thought the juice was still there off the dribble. I did think the confidence from three was a little bit down, and I think it's really important that he just gets those up, and he almost starts shooting differently. It's similar to Josh, like where when he's feeling himself, like his shot just looks different than when he's hesitating and pausing and waiting, versus like mellow OG, who's like jabbing and firing in someone's face. And similarly, like for Detroit, like maybe it's Tobias Harris, like I don't really think they have a great matchup for him, and yet against the Pistons this year in 3 games, he's not been particularly efficient. And there have been times where he's tried to play bully ball and it hasn't looked all that good. So I'm curious, like what it looks like for him in the half court, like when he gets isolations, like when he's maybe operating as a short roll guy or setting a screen for Cat or someone. Like, how do you get OG like bully ball moments, bully ball possessions in the half court, or is that even a priority for you? Given to your point, you have Mikal to attack a small. Jalen Brunson's going to be playoff Jalen Brunson, and you have Cat, and you want Cat to take 1,000,000 threes in this series.
I think it has to be a priority, just one of Mikal or OG. And this is like entirely on the coaching staff. Like when the series starts, or maybe not, maybe like the series starts, and I think you go through Cat and Brunson a lot. But as the series adjusts, and then if that play, that pick and pop, you're going away from it because the defensive scheme switch, then I think you have to be really, really conscious of calling OG and Mikal's number. And those are the games where you saw OG feel the most confident, is when they had set plays called for him. Like, look, OG, you're going to be the primary option on this play. You're getting the ball. Once you get the ball, attack. You can do whatever you want. And I think similarly, that happened for Mikal earlier on when Brunson was injured. And then that kind of shifted to OG kind of on the back end of when Brunson was injured. But whoever one you want to call the plays for, I think those two avenues of attacking through your wings are going to be some of the best plays moving forward just throughout the playoffs. Like, those have to be open avenues of attacking, where one, you're most of the time attacking a weaker defender, but also two, like when you get more engaged versions of OG, of Mikal, you kind of see that confidence grow. You kind of see it permeate to the rest of their game. And it does look different. Like,
all right, guys, that is it for part 1 with Bailey, but don't fear, part 2 was going to drop later today, where we talk about the Knicks defense and slowing down the Detroit Pistons, specifically how to stop Cade Cunningham. And I know we touched on that a little bit in segment 1 of the first episode we put out this week. Well, this is more so the deep dive version, right? If you're a real sicko, you are going to love this episode. Bailey, as you could tell from this one, is a really high level basketball mind, and we get really into the weeds of what it's going to take to slow down Cade. But until then, really appreciate you guys tuning in. I wanted to remind you before you head out today about our newsletter giveaway. That's right. Now that the New York Knicks are in the playoffs, we have you covered every step of the way with the Locked On Knicks newsletter. And you can subscribe to the newsletter for expert analysis, insider insights, and all the playoff actions over straight to your inbox for free. Plus, as a subscriber, you'll be entered to win one of these 3 amazing prizes: a $2,500 Best Buy gift card to upgrade your Sports Cave setup, a $3,000 Game Time gift card, and a $200 Fanatics gift card. It's super easy to enter. All you have to do is subscribe to the newsletter over at lockedondaily.com between today and April 30th to be automatically entered to win. Again, subscribe today and enter to win by clicking the link in the description. Until next time, guys, we'll talk to you soon here on Locked On Knicks.